On today's episode of Boosting Your Occupancy, I'm talking to Henry, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of a leading later living care and real estate specialist. Henry brings strong advisory, operational, and development experience and a clear belief in the sector's potential to create long term value for both residents and investors. So, thank you very much, Henry, for joining the podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
For those who may not know Auriens, can you please share a bit about Auriens and the journey that you've been on?
Of course. So Auriens is a later living community which opened here in the heart of Chelsea in 2021. It comprises 56 residences, a mixture of one and two beds, and a range of amenities. So everything from a cinema to a spa, pool, gym, exercise studio, restaurant, etc. All based around the service, so support from our residents move in to when they need more household help and medical care as they age in place. In 2022, we were acquired by US private equity group Oaktree Capital Management, who also acquired Amicala, that I was part of the team. And we were merged into one blended family and now focus on selling down Auriens, which is a hybrid community, both offering rental and purchase options.
Okay, super. And how do you see the group evolving in the next 5 years?
I think later living in the UK is going to be a very different story to what it has been. In the past, it's been very much a sort of lifestyle-led offer. And I think that as our customers are changing and they are becoming more savvy to the options of increasing number of options, but also to wanting to be able to age in place, I think you're going to see an evolution not only of what the sector is delivering, but also what we here at Auriens are delivering, which is to lean into care and provide that
Mm.
pathway of care. So our next community will be a site in Weybridge, which we already have planning permission on for about 170 apartments, but we'll be looking to redesign that over the coming months to really reflect where we see the pathway of care and that journey that supports residents once they move in as independent living and they're able to age in place with us.
So, that leaning into care, do you see that as a trend that will continue? We don't have that many operators at the moment having that care proposition as part of their offering. I mean, there certainly are some, such
Mhm.
as life care residences or Audley, or yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I think it's crucial to where or fundamental to where the sector will go.
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough, and I'm going to come on to it later, to study markets overseas. But
Mm.
having been out, for instance, to the US in June and seen 11 communities across Florida, absolutely key to occupancy and to resident satisfaction is about having that pathway of care. And that is not only the sort of domiciliary care, that
Mhm.
is the provision of nursing care right the way through to memory care. So that independent living, assisted living, and then memory care route is a pathway that will come not only through customers voting with their feet, but
Mhm.
I think it is also from an occupancy point of view what investors will demand. And also, I think as planning legislation tightens up in this UK around what is later living and its different sort of subclasses, you're going to see more and more onus on people providing care
Mhm.
to support people so they can move once and then age in place.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So if we then move into the topic of attracting customers, at Oriens, you have a style of selling called prospect centered selling, which is very different from the traditional hard sell. Could you please talk to us about, your experience that you've been in residential sales and later living sales and what you see as some of the differences from an emotional or psych?
I think the prospect into selling has been an eye opener for me coming into this stage of my career with Auriens. And I was fortunate enough when Amicala and Auriens were being purchased by Oaktree to go out to the US and actually to meet the gentleman, David Smith, who founded Prospect Center Selling. And it was incredible to spend time with him and actually see the difference he'd have made to their
Mhm.
sales teams across the US. It was really heartening when I heard a gentleman who was running a scheme in Texas who said, David Smith has changed my life.
Mm.
And I thought it was very, very powerful because when you go back to my residential roots, it was about selling features and benefits. It was the classic ABC. always be closing. You're literally looking to see how many people can you get into to view a property, creating that sort of momentum, that demand and clamor to try and secure it, and then getting your offers and drawing that through. And often people would have, if I think about my London residential development time with Savills, where we were going out to the Far East and selling investment properties, those were people who were buying because they wanted to get money out of, for instance, out of Hong Kong or out of China into the UK. So their motivations were very different to someone who has an older person who has lived in their family home for many, many years and who is starting to feel that there are problems with where they live and are quite often scared and frightened by what they're going to do. And they're worried about, for instance, becoming a burden on their family. They're worried about using the stairs, and they're worried about their changing their sort of underlying health conditions. And so no matter if you were to apply the residential approach of features and benefits and always be closing, you're never going to convince them. The great thing about prospect centered selling is that comes from the psychology of why people move and how they move. And so it's about understanding and spending the time. In fact, David Smith, who I mentioned earlier, wrote a fantastic book. It's about time. And that is the point, is understanding the customer, understanding them. And we celebrate advances, not actually sales. So it's about slowing down the process, really getting to understand what the problem is with their existing home and how we can find a solution by what we have here at Auriens. Or indeed, it may be that the best choice for them is to stay at home, or indeed to look at other solutions. For instance, they may have quite heavy care requirements, and so actually a care home is more suitable for them than Auriens. Or indeed, they may be quite young and they may be very fit and agile, and actually moving to a later living community is not actually the right solution, for them. But unless you understand the deep rooted reason as to why they are resisting making a change, you're never going to convince them. So you can't be selling product. You have to be providing a solution to that.
So, in order to focus more on the psychology, could you just express maybe some techniques that are used here, such as great discovery questions? When you say slowing down, how you'll sort of take that time to build a rapport
Yeah.
and get to know the person, and maybe a nice example
Yeah.
that you've seen or that you've heard of.
So certainly often when people will come here to look round Orients, we
Mm.
actually won't show them round the whole building because there's a lot to see here. And so we will spend that first meeting with them really looking to understand them, to understand their current living arrangements, to understand their current health, to understand who may be an influencer on them. Often they have a child who is leading the charge to make a decision, understanding what's important to them, trying to understand what a typical day looks like, what their interests are, where their children live, where their grandchildren live. And so that leads us to the power of home visits. So we will go out to our prospect homes, and there you can really get an understanding of what the issues are. For instance, in Chelsea, we have many people who live in townhouses, and if they go to, you go and have a look at the upstairs, bedrooms, upstairs floors, you know that at that point there may be an issue with their mobility, that actually the stairs are starting to become a bit of an issue, and so moving to lateral living would actually be, very, very important to them. Also, you can look at sort of family pictures and really get an understanding of who the important people are within their life, who's helping to drive perhaps looking at this move, or and actually whether the couples are aligned. Quite often you'll find where you have couples that one will be wanting to make the move, will be open to making the move, but the other has a connection in that property that is making them resist it. And there's a story that I give when I do podcasts and in conferences, which is not relating to Orients, which actually came from Alex Fisher, who was the co-founder of Sherpa and this PCS methodology that was sort of such great followers of. And then she talked about a lady who had been resisting making a change for a while. And she went and saw her on a home visit and built the trust and had a trust breakthrough. And we really work on building the trust and rapport. And this particular lady said, the reason I won't make the move is because my sons are both adopted and I don't know where their birth certificates are. And I'm petrified that they will find out if they help me clear the house. So Alex, with permission from this prospect, went through her property and found in her loft the two birth certificates. This lady was able to keep her secret, and she was able to move. So going back to your point earlier about the difference between residential selling, in a residential salesperson would be going sell, sell, sell. I want to sell the benefits of you being at Auriens and of the apartment you're looking at. No, if that in that case of being Auriens, no amount of hard sell is going to convince that person when there is a fundamental issue there. Another story that again from the US, which I think is a great one, is a lady called Landry went to do a home visit, and lady was there. She was quite sort of resistant to the visit, but Landry said, "Will you please? I'd love you to show me around." They went out onto her front porch, in one of those American front porches that you sit out on the sort of wicker chairs and overlooking a golf course. And the lady turned to Landry and said, "The reason I won't move is that my husband died, and I'm worried. We sat out here every day, and I'm worried that if I move, I'll lose my memories of him." And what Landry did, which links to another thing we do is called creative follow-ups, was she took a picture of the view. She went back to the office and had it printed and framed and sent to her. And it said, with a card which said, "Wherever you go, you'll always have your memories. You always have this view." And as a result, she then the prospect said, "I'd like to come and have a look," and she then moved into the property. So you can see how understanding what the problem was and looking for a solution to that problem enabled us, or that particular case with Landry, to advance. And that's the same methodology that we use here at Auriens and that others use across the sector based on this prospect-centered selling approach.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So maybe something our listeners could think about is whether they are doing home visits at the moment, and that they could be a really successful technique to moving people down the journey. I think a powerful question you can ask on a home visit is, why would you want to leave here?
Mm.
Which will hopefully unlock a lot of rationales of why they might be feeling anxious about leaving, or what they don't like about their current house, such as they find it too high maintenance to look after the garden, that they feel lonely. And then listening to that information could be gold dust for you, then knowing how to move that
Houses,
forward.
often these houses that people are living in are houses they've raised their families in.
Yeah.
They've lived there for sort of 20, 30 years.
Mm.
There's a lot of stuff that they've accumulated, a lifetime of possessions. And so often a solution is because they're almost very afraid to make the move because they don't have to sort it out. There's a stress associated with moving. And so, we'll have, right sizing consultants, downsizing consultants who will go in and help them space plan how their existing home could look in one of our properties or another, and also how they help them with the decluttering process and making the move feel much less daunting. And so it's understanding that through, for instance, those home visits, which is gold in terms of what you can find out.
Hmm. So if we come on to what you were just talking about, which you call creative follow-ups,
Mhm.
we know in later living that the decision purchase can be quite long.
Yeah.
Um, and would love to hear how you nurture prospects through what could be a long decision making, such as what you mean by the creative follow-up with that example of the view. And I'm sure you've got others there, and how you empower your teams to be able to use creative follow-ups, and how that distinguishes versus just a typical vanilla phone call,
Mhm.
or a typical email that just anybody could be sending.
Yeah. Well, it's undertaking planning sessions. So we as a team, and also as the individual sales team members, will spend a lot of time planning for a call. So even though a call may last 10, 15 minutes, you might spend an hour planning for that. What is the outcome you're looking to achieve from that? I think that one of the great sort of lessons I learned was from a US operator called Jason Kohler from Baztec Communities, who operate, for instance, the All Seasons brand. And actually was listening to a podcast where Jason said, design your events program for your prospects as well as for your residents. And I think a big part of what we do here at Orange Chelsea is our events program, and also around our Friends of Auriens, which is our club. And that's a great way to nurture people to come along. So as part of the discovery phase with them, we're learning what their particular interests are, and then we can then design events to suit that. So as an example, you would have seen it when you came in this afternoon or earlier today. We have a stage that's been built, dance floor that's been built in our lobby area, massive, 8 meters by 6. And that is because we have the English National Ballet graduates, the English National Ballet School, who are one of our chosen partners, coming to perform various amazing ballet movements, including the Nutcracker, and then a talk being given by their artistic director, Lynn Charles. And at that, we have not only residents who are really into the arts and big lovers of ballet, but also we have prospects where ballet is very important to them and the arts coming to that. And so that is how we engage them within Auriens, both in terms of the service that's offered here, but also in terms of the community. And so the sort of analogy I give, which is a poor one, and it's Christmas time, so I feel like I can,
Yeah.
is if you imagine the Grinch, which is, for some, the Grinch is the one with Jim Carrey. To me, the Grinch is the cartoon one from a few years ago, the animated one. And if you think about the Grinch, his heart grows stronger and he loves Christmas at the end because he sort of comes in out of the cold. And I think the sort of, the psychology that you're seeing here is people who come into the warmth of Auriens, to the service, to the peace of mind that they can see that's been offered to our residents. That helps to advance them. And then when they go back home and they have to do everything themselves, suddenly that can feel quite cold. And so by people being part of our community, we're able to help progress them through and nurture them through. But also, I would say separately to that, it's understanding their motivation. So those who are more needs-based will convert significantly quicker. So for us, it was about altering our offering here. So the original founders was very much lifestyle. We have very much lent into the not only care of a small C, but also care of a big C. We have in-house our care and nursing business called Draycott Nursing and Care. And that provides amazing care and support to our residents at a point that they need it. And that can be when they move in, or it can be over time. And knowing that that is there is really, really crucial. And then equally, we have sort of an extension of that. And the pathway is a partnership with Loveday for those who may need more specialist care later on.
Okay. So I think it was really quite powerful what you were saying about events here. And you're right, I did walk into a dance studio, which was fantastic to see the partnership. Could you perhaps bring to life some more examples for people who are listening to think about, how do I put on these events, which we're saying are really a great both lead generation channel as well as nurturing the guests? So you use the example of someone being into arts. Is there any other examples, perhaps to do with sports, rugby, or music, Chopin?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So touching on sport first, last year we had an event where we had former England cricket captain Alex Stewart, a childhood hero of mine, come to do an evening talking about his career and cricket in general. And I was thankful my brother helped me write the questions along with a sort of number of colleagues in the later living world. And what was great was we had a couple who came and sat on the table having dinner with Alec and myself, who had come to an event we'd done previously on rugby. And as they were going to leave, I said to them, "What do you think of the evening? The rugby evening, loved it, really interesting. Were there any particular sports you'd like us to cover?" And they said, "No, we're just really interested in sports and general subjects, and we just like to come and, attend them when we can." So we designed that event for them. Gave them the VIP table with Alec. They had great chats. Alec's first thing when he said to them, he obviously is not used to PCS. He said, "When are you moving in?" The great thing is, a year later, they are now residents in Auriens. They had looked at a number of other communities, both in London and outside, and they were delighted and are delighted by the decision they've made. And we're obviously very pleased that they're here. So that event helped to nurture them along the journey, along with the home visits, along with them coming in here, along with them going off to look at other options. We encourage people to go and look at other options because it has to be the right decision for them. Equally, from the arts point of view, we had an evening where we invited guests to, you mentioned Chopin, Patricia Hodge, and Lucy Parham, and Alex Jennings, who was the last Prince Charles in The Crown. And we had a gentleman who came to that as a prospect. And halfway through, I said, "What do you think of this?" And he said, "This is the best evening of my life." And when I said to him why, it wasn't because of Auriens, it was because it reminded him of when he was evacuated in 1940 from Poland. So it had a very personal connection for him. And he is someone who is now out in the community singing the praises of Auriens and is attending other events and working through that sort of journey of understanding what we are and who we are. So events are great for feeding the top of the funnel, but also nurturing people through to conversion. But also here where we run a hybrid community, so we are both rental and purchase, it's great for resident retention as well. And also our residents are really key ambassadors for us and advocates for us and introducing their friends.
Mm.
They are the people who are there here living and breathing Oriens and are able to, really showcase and say it's a great place to be, which feeds into our net promoter score, which is really important to us.
Yeah, super. So if we explore a bit more about feeding the top of the funnel
Yeah.
and other people who might be singing the praises of Oriens, word of mouth is one of the strongest lead generation conversion sources. Could you talk to us about the way that your team approaches outreach and partnerships to build up really positive word of mouth referrals?
Yeah. So often with later living, people are unaware of their options.
Mm.
They're unaware of the choices that they have. I think what we've seen as a very effective sort of traditional performance marketing is around direct mail. The issue with direct mail around here, where there's an increasing amount
Mm.
of later living options across London, whereas previously there've been none since, with the exception of Life Care, is that I was at someone's house in Belgravia recently, and she said I'm being carpet bombed, and she
Mm.
had a sort of pile of pamphlets from, as she put it, from all the different operators, and I think the message starts to get lost. So whilst direct marketing is a key tool for feeding the top of the funnel, word of mouth is really where we see multiple touch points, but it's that advocacy within the local community. This year, circa almost 90% of our new residents,
Mm.
have come from within 2 miles. So we are a hyper local community here. And people want to stay typically within Chelsea. They want to be able to go to Chelsea Green, where they've gone for years. They want to be able to go to their favourite restaurants, to enjoy the King's Row. In fact, if you look at where our town
Mm.
car, Range Rover, goes, it does the various hospitals, but Duke of York Square, Chelsea
Mm.
Green, Peter Jones. So for us, being involved with the local community is absolutely key. So whether that be local societies, whether it be local clubs, residents associations, whether it be sponsoring, the various carol services that happen
Mm.
in Chelsea. We're known for our mince pies at this time of year and getting those out there. And so the outreach team are typically out the office. We call them partnerships team. Typically out the office sort of 80% of the time, really engaging with not only prospects but friends of prospects, advisors of prospects, and also families of potential prospects. And that helps us to provide that reassurance. To give you sort of an example of how it worked, we had a prospect who went on to buy, where the eldest daughter made the inquiry through Google, and she was looking for concierge departments in Chelsea. It took them to our website. They saw on there Patricia, who heads up the partnerships team, and they happened to know her uncle from where their country property is. And they then spoke to her uncle and took soundings on whether we were the right sort. And from there, they then made their inquiry and came in.
Mm.
And for them, the issue that was going back to understanding their issues was that they were living in a 5-story townhouse and the stairs were starting to become a bit of an issue. So lateral living was then the solution, but it was very much about are we the right place for them to be? And actually, for us here, when we opened, because we were the first community at this in the sort of super prime market,
Mm.
there was a lot of skepticism as to what we are, or misinformation. So we were a care home, or we were a block that was going to be full of international investors. And
Mm.
a lot of what Patricia did initially was to get out there into the local community and go to lots of drinks parties and go to lots of events and really write the misinformation that was out there, and start to invite the curious to come and see Oriens, and to work with a range of ambassadors, influencers locally, who could bring in their friends for lunches, to come to events, etc.
Mm.
And I think the highlight for me of seeing this working is not only in terms of the sales. It was when Patricia went to a drinks party in the summer, and the gentleman who was hosting said, "Oh, Oriens, I've heard that's such a lot of fun."
Mm.
And that to me is when your reputation is positive in the local community. And just as we're seeing our residents recommend, we're also seeing people who attend events here then recommend their friends to move to Oriens. And
Mm,
so
mm.
you create this sort of wave of momentum and positive outreach.
So we are saying that community outreach is a really effective form of lead generation and nurturing. So we would encourage all operators there to try to do it very often. Perhaps twice a week would be something to aim for. Make a list of different organizations that are relevant to your audience. So you could have a segmentation. Some organizations are in the healthcare, GPs, hospitals. Some might be sporting associations, golf, bowling, some might be schools, churches. Just, perhaps make a list and then start empowering your team to go out there and make those relationships.
Yeah, and it's something I've seen in the US when I talk to
Mm,
colleagues over there. They often don't do any advertising. They are literally filling communities and having big waiting lists
mm,
through their community outreach team, through their partnerships team, because people are not relying upon traditional marketing methods to
mm,
sell properties here. Our prospects don't go to Rightmove. They typically don't go to estate agents.
mm,
Also, estate agents, and I say this as a former estate agent, they don't have the patience to be able
mm,
to nurture those leads and spend the time. So when we work with agents, it is about them getting people to the door. As I said earlier, we invite the curious,
mm,
because if we can get people through the door, then they can see the service, they can have meet the concierge and see that friendly smile, and have a natter with them. They can see how welcoming the F&B team are.
mm,
They can see the benefits of going to the gym and how our events create a community. And so it's about getting people through the door. Uh,
mhm,
that
mhm,
drives demand, drives awareness, and drives conversion.
mm. Yeah. So maybe we talk now a bit about the international markets there. You touched on how some of them have this admirable waiting list, and it's for many reasons, such as the ambassadors being, the residents being great ambassadors and drawing in a lot of their friends and families. Be lovely to hear about some of your work and trips abroad and any sort of reflections or lessons.
I think that the UK, if I think back to when I first went overseas, so it's about 10 years ago, I went to Australia. That was on the sort of back of the ARCO Consumer Code, which was the Retirement Villages Act from New Zealand. And at the time, you had the Law Commission undertaking its work. They reported obviously in 2017. And that was very much looking like we were going to have primary legislation, which was going to really see the deferred management fee become the default model. And I think everyone started going towards New Zealand because that's where you could see the great success stories around Ryman, MetLife Care, etc. You had Life Care as a Kiwi operator opening Battersea Place in 2016. But I think probably because of investors' structure and wariness,
Mhm.
care was something that most operators weren't able to provide. I think about when Legal& and General were coming into the sector, care couldn't be provided within or was what became Inspired Villages. And the sector almost pivoted to more the Australasian model or Australian model, which was more lifestyle led. And that solved a point in terms of what we saw was this sort of arms race in terms of amenity being provided. This being the sort of the sort of king of the pile in terms of the sort of the amount of staff to here, relative to number of residents, but also in terms of the quality of the amenity. But I think the customer has changed. I think COVID changed the customer a lot, and I think that the lack of legislation in the UK and the has meant that investors are not as wedded to the deferred management fee model as they once were. Equally, at the same time, the great growth that happened was around multifamily built to rent, single family built to rent, and also purpose built student accommodation. And that growth was the REITs and the institutional investors coming in, a private equity group sort of funding the early stage. And you could see the returns there were driven on low, short project timescales effectively. So fill up rates were
Mhm.
incredibly fast, and so they could get these things built, and also they became quite formulaic in terms of house builders building them, being able to get the build costs down, their net to gross being relatively high. Whereas senior living has been every scheme has pretty much been bespoke. They have very poor net for gross, and that was about driving the premium at the start and then having a premium at the back end. I remember last year when I did a conference, I talked about Australia, having been back there to look again, and as to give us an insight for Weybridge. And I spoke to an Australian architect, Frank, and I said, what's the view of the UK in Australia? He said, you're just really expensive. Really expensive lifestyle villages,
Mm.
because in Australia they're not putting the premium at the top end, the front end, or in New Zealand, because it's all about deferred management fee income.
Mm.
But because there isn't regulation in this sector from the sort of the government point of view, it's more around industry regulation. Investors are not prepared to bet on it. They want to make their development returns. So that's why you're seeing slow sales rates, and you're seeing a lack of investment really within the sort of sector, and mature portfolios selling. I think what we're seeing, having been out to the US, is that's where the money is. That's where the investment is. They are investing with the structures that work for PE, that work for REITs, that work for institutions. And I remember walking around a scheme in Tampa that's run by Allegro, and saying to the operator, the executive director, who's your investor? And she went, PGIM. Now, PGIM I spoke to years ago when we were looking at Amicala. They just couldn't get their heads around the deferred management fee. Yet here they are investing and trading portfolios in America of senior living. And equally, you're seeing Welltower, who are a
Mm.
very large,
Yeah.
in fact, now they're the world's largest REIT, who are massive in seniors living in the US, coming over to the UK, and they're not investing in senior living.
Yeah.
They are investing in care homes. So obviously their deals recently on Barchester, HC1, etc., shows that
Mm.
a sector which in the UK is far bigger than senior living. If you go to the US, it's the other way around. But yet over here, even though we have all of the fundamentals around demand and a growing demand and a lack of supply, they're choosing to invest several billion into the care sector. So I think the lessons that we can learn from the US is that rental is definitely what the investors want.
Mm-hmm.
I think from a customer point of view, they want to see rental and for sale, so a hybrid community like we have here at Orange Chelsea, which gives them the choice. Those who want home ownership, those who want the flexibility of being able to move out after, say, 3 months' notice. The provision of care
Yeah.
sitting at the heart of it. It was interesting being out in the US. Those communities which didn't have memory care, they had lower occupancy. And you talk to the sales director of sales, you talk to the executive director, they said, what would you like? Those who didn't have it was the memory care. What's a great conversion tool for people moving in? It was the fact that memory care was there, or assisted living.
Mm.
You could have couples where one was in the assisted living or memory care, and the other one was in independent living. So we're not necessarily going to directly translate the American model.
Mm.
You can certainly see in terms of occupancy, you can see a shift with customers being older, which is what we've seen in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have the product typically here in the UK that is meeting what those customers want and what the investors want. And equally, it's providing a lack of clarity to government to get behind the sector. So we're sort of, I've been in this industry for many, many years. It's an amazing place to work. The colleagues I work with, our residents, both in senior living and in the care home sector where I've been, are incredible. And we need to provide a solution, but we need to rethink how we are doing things over here fundamentally to really see the growth that will provide a solution to an aging population, which has so many benefits to the housing market by freeing up family housing that is underoccupied, but also by helping to solve the social care crisis by getting people to move earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can do that, we will then have really happy customers, and that will drive really good investment value if you operate it really well.
So just to paraphrase, then you're saying to drive more investor volume and deliver what customers want. Some of those levers would be about offering customers choice around a hybrid of rental and for sale, offering more of a continuum of care,
Yep.
and perhaps as a third, offering more choice around price points of more affordable.
Yeah. You want to increase your addressable market
Mm-hmm.
to be as large as it can be.
Mm.
If you look at some of the, you know, issues of, in your former role, when we first met, you were
Mm.
you were working for a later living operator, and because there was, and at the time that was a for sale model. I
Mm.
remember a site that we had that I was marketing for Savills in Bristol for you. The problem you had there was because there was no deferred management fee,
Mm.
the service charge was very, very high because it's full cost recovery. and the purchase prices or the asking prices were the same as
Mm.
the houses, if not more, that people were looking to move out of. So there was, it's the carrot and the stick. There's a real emotion here. People want to be able to release equity when they make that move. I think it's about giving people something that they see value in,
Mm.
that they can genuinely afford, so your addressable market is bigger. And I think that's why the mid-market has not been cracked in the UK. We've got the likes of Care Charitable Trust, who've done phenomenal work within the sort of multi-tenure model. But I think also, we've seen, Mayfield have obviously got their first community now open, which is great. But we need to see this across the country. And that is going to come through making it affordable for people to be able to buy or rent,
Mhm.
but also to make it from a house, from a construction point of view, make it efficient to build and cost effective to build. And then you can roll these out at scale. If you look at, McCarthy and Stone, I know they get a bit of a sort of, bashing in the sector. I have huge respect for them. Actually, right
Mm.
back to when
Mm.
Bill Stone and John McCarthy set up the business, because they knew how to build an efficient building. They knew taking a 40-meter frontage, they knew where to put
Mm.
the one beds to get their net to gross as high as possible.
Yeah.
They knew how to make the stairs a particular way so they could make their net to gross their saleable space.
Mm.
So, the lessons of house builders. Look at Ryman in New Zealand. They started off as a house builder. They're now one of the most valuable businesses in New Zealand on the stock exchange. Those are the sorts of lessons that we can apply. But fundamentally, it comes to having a product that people see value in,
Mm.
that provides a solution to a problem and allows them to age in place and support them as their needs change.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to get to. And you can see it
Mm.
glaringly obvious in the US. You can see it in New Zealand. You can see it in Australia, where they've put in care and occupancy on villages. We've gone from about 92%
Yeah.
that don't provide care to 99% of the ones which do.
Mm. No, it's really strong arguments there. Hopefully, we will embrace all of that. Finally, then bringing it back to Auriens,
Yep.
what excites you about the future of Auriens and your role in redefining later living?
For me, there's several things. The team. I have an amazing team here. We have an amazing executive team. We're all on a journey together to provide a solution. We have learned an incredibly large amount from coming into this business. Judy Fawcett, our CEO, and myself, coming in and really understanding our customers and listening to them.
Mm.
And I'm really excited by how the journey has taken us from the sort of lifestyle that the community that it was, to still having that lifestyle, because it's still very important, but having that care pathway. We've seen our conversion times significantly shorten as a result of that. We've significantly outperformed the local market during what has
Mm.
been a difficult year on a macro basis, as of the run up to last week's budget. And so, having been out and looked around the world at what is happening
Mm.
and seen a sector which is still struggling to get off the starting blocks, but for us feeling we have a solution, or on the way to a solution that is market facing,
Mm.
I'm incredibly excited to, for the next 5 years,
Mm.
to welcome more residents into Chelsea, but also into future communities, and to potentially look at, sub brands within the group as we look at different price
Yeah.
points. But in essence, taking the magic that is here at Auriens and applying that to different locations, different price points, but very much leaning into what the customer wants
Mhm.
and what the investor wants.
So, Henry, thank you very much for today's podcast. It's been brilliant to talk through your insight and reflections on later living. Maybe just getting to know Henry a bit more now. It would be lovely if you might want to share something that you're passionate about or interests you at the moment.
Sure. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on the podcast. I'd say the probably thing at the moment is my brother has sadly got motor neuron disease, and he was diagnosed 2 years ago, and he's been an
Mm.
absolute star, as of the whole family, in particular his wife Natalie. And for me, last year I decided to try and do something to help, and I cycled from London to Paris, among various other things, raising money for Motor Neurone Disease Association. And this year, with Hugh's blessing, my brother, I've moved that on to become a campaigner around motor neurone disease, for the association. And next year I'm getting back on my bike to go to Amsterdam. I've been inspired by Kevin Sinfield and Rob Burrows, and actually how family can come together and how we are able to try and make a difference, and how, Hugh himself is putting himself forward to almost be an ambassador and to share his stories. He's still working. And so, when I think I've had a tough day, he is, I think of him and think of the amazing work that he's doing. And so, yeah, making him proud, making my family proud by, being that classic middle-aged man in lycra is something that I really enjoy and I'm very passionate about. And it's a really nice, in terms of seeing the positive side of it, it's a nice distraction from work and also the sort of, the sad side of motor neurone. So I'd say that's probably my focus, my passion,
Mm.
and beyond family at the moment.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. It's really admirable. I'm wishing you all the best with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, well, thank you, Henry. It's really been brilliant talking to you. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you, Ali.